Good morning, my fellow Michiganders. Good morning, my fellow Americans. Welcome to the Grassroots Army podcast. I am, of course, your host, former Michigan gubernatorial candidate, Garrett Soldano, and we are reaching out throughout the country, having great people, ordinary people doing extraordinary things that are getting on the show now. And I am very excited to bring on Derrick Evans, who is running for the 1st Congressional District in West Virginia. Okay, so we're going to have him on, and he's going to kind of introduce himself, obviously, what his platform is, but some of the things he was involved in the January 6th shenanigans, as I'm going to call it, because one thing that we are starting to realize is there were some bad actors in that crowd pushing a narrative. The corporate media pushed a narrative, and a lot of folks are serving some really hard time, which I firmly believe that they should be let out, especially now knowing that the FBI had a direct involvement of instigating, pushing things, and really entrapping a lot of these folks. And so he's got a great story, an interesting story. And I'm also going to push out today, too, a video to let you guys all see about what the corporate media, what social media influencers can really kind of push out a narrative and kind of edit videos to push out a narrative. And I think we all need to be reminded that, hey, you got to question everything. Question me. Question the corporate media. Question these social media influencers. You really have to question a lot of things. Get all the information before people react. Because the video that he posted was a very short piece of the puzzle, and it really caught, it basically went viral, over 3 million views, and it really pushed out a really hot garbage narrative. But we're going to get to that here in a few minutes. So I am absolutely excited to have on my man, Derrick Evans. Welcome to the Grassroots Army podcast, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me on, man. I really appreciate it.
In just a few, because I was already warned not to talk football on this interview, but I can't help myself. Derrick is a huge Marshall fan. If anyone followed my career at Western Michigan University, Marshall University took not one, but 2 championship rings from my fingers in basically the last minute and seconds of the game. And Derrick was actually at the game where we lost back in 1999.
Small world, man. Like I said, I was at the games watching it at the time, and here we are chatting. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's funny how God works and how this interview even took place. It was from a previous interview that I had, and the connection happened. And so It's just amazing how we are all intertwined. So let's let the audience hear, Derrick, a little bit about your story. You were a state rep first, correct?
That is correct. I was elected to the West Virginia State House in 2020 and was the first Republican to win my district in over 98 years. And, I don't know about other places, but here locally, people go to the courthouse and wait for the votes to come in, on election night, which is what we did. And we were really excited to win. And we came home, turned on the TV, and started watching the presidential election being, ripped away from President Trump and the American people. And so I, started getting frustrated like everyone else and decided to go exercise my natural God-given rights of free speech on January 6th.
Yeah, and obviously you just got out of prison a while back. You served how many months?
I had an 18-month legal battle. I was one of the first people arrested. I was arrested January 8th, 2 days after January 6th. Had an 18-month legal battle. Did 3 months in federal prison, and then did 8 days of solitary confinement during that time as well.
And can you go into a little bit about what you told me about, with the lawyer, where you don't get a public defender, the government decides?
Yeah, so it's important I didn't know this, so I just thought Bill Gates could get a public defender if he wanted to do so. And it just shows the corruption, because I'm going to share another story briefly after to kind of compare and contrast as well in terms of what's happening specifically in January 6th. But so if you make over, and it's not much, if you make a certain percentage over the poverty rate in your area, then they don't have to give you a public defender. The government, so when you get arrested, they take all your bank records and financial statements, all this stuff. They see all this, and then they determine whether you can afford an attorney or not. And so my wife and I, with 4 children living in rural West Virginia, they said if you make over, it's either 40 or 45, I don't know the exact amount. If we made over $45,000 a year combined, then we were over the threshold. They did not have to give us a public defender, and they refused to do so. And so we were forced to, pay all this money, which we don't have. It pretty much bankrupted our family, which I think was their goal. Now, on the flip side of that, we have a January 6th defendant who, and his name's slipping my mind right now. There's so many of us at this point, unfortunately. But he he had a public defender, got up with some people who raised some money for him to hire his own attorney. He goes to hire his own attorney, and the judge denies it and says, no, we're too close to trial. You have to keep your public defender. So on one hand, they're telling me I can't have a public defender. And on the other hand, they're telling someone else they have to keep a public defender. That just shows you the whole court system is corrupt. And this is what I tell people. The weaponized DOJ that everyone talks about, the weaponized government, is definitely out of control and is a concern. As someone who's went through the whole process, I think the most concerning and the most scary thing of all is the weaponized court system. And the reason I say that is if we had a fair and just court system and honorable judges, a weaponized DOJ could bring all the charges they wanted to, and that honorable court system would be like a veil of protection. They would just fall dead as they come to the court system. But what we're finding out is the courts are in collusion with the weaponized DOJ, and they're just as corrupt, if not more corrupt.
So let's get into that corruption, obviously, because a lot of the January 6th, and if last time I checked, they haven't released all the footage, but they are releasing a lot of the footage now, and it's starting to paint a different narrative. Now, we got somebody on here right now and, asking a question, how can you differentiate between a peaceful trespasser and a violent rioter, and the narrative that people are watching and the narrative that's been basically force-fed down their throat by the corporate media and everything else. But the more footage that gets released, and just like we were talking about with an interview that I had with Jeremy Brown, a Green Beret who's sitting in prison right now, that according to him, he was offered a plea deal, and he said, hey, you can get out, time served. And he says, no, I'm staying in because I'm going to basically let everyone know how corrupt the FBI is, and he's going to expose the whole thing. So he's rotting in prison right now because he took a constitutional oath, and it means something to that guy.
Yep.
So the point is as this footage starts to get released, are you like looking at this and say, hey, were there FBI agents, were there bad actors inciting this violence, pushing people forward? Did you experience any of that on the ground?
So my January 6th stuff, it's important for people to understand, people who weren't there especially, and if you've never been to the Capitol building, it's a huge, huge building. Depending on what side of the building you're on, which corner of the building, what time you were there, everybody had a totally different experience that day. So what people have seen on TV in terms of, the hopped up media narrative, this false narrative of insurrection, showing the violence and the destruction, that was on the west side of the building and primarily around the West Tunnel area. I was on the east side of the building, so I never saw any violence. I never saw any destruction. I was never accused of those things either, for that matter. And so my experience in person is a lot different. Now, since I've been out, I've obviously done a lot of research because it's such an important day, in my life and really in American history at this point, because they made it out to be. So I have no doubt that there were federal agents in some capacity that were involved there. I don't know what their involvement was. Part of that is because they've suppressed the truth. And it's important for the American people to know and understand that they've not only suppressed the footage from the American people, they've withheld this footage from January 6th defendants, which is a Brady rule violation. I never saw the footage. I had an 18-month legal battle, went to prison, got out of prison around this time last year, and I'm seeing the footage for the first time as a January 6th. And so we got people rotting in prison right now. A lot of this footage would exonerate them in a fair court system, in a fair, court hearing, and it was suppressed from them, and they were not able to access it. So this is a huge, I tell everyone, this is probably the greatest humanitarian crisis of our generation that's taking place right now surrounding January 6th.
I would agree, especially, I told you this, I spent like 3.5 hours, and we're producing this show right now to really release Jeremy's story. And he confirmed what you just said. Like, he's still fighting to get the footage and everything else that would basically exonerate him in his appeal. And this is out of his own mouth. He said if he wins his appeal, it's going to force to have on record what the FBI did, and it's going to allow a lot of these January 6ers to get out. And that's who he's fighting for right now, because his case is going to set precedents. I don't know if you followed Michigan politics, but Michigan is probably one of the most corrupt politically in our union. But our own Ryan Kelly, who ran for governor against me, he just pleaded a couple months back because he was at January 6th. And so I think he's in prison right now. And he was kind of in the same situation. Like, holy cow, they are going to threaten you with years and years in prison. He's a family man. He has, a lot of kids and a wife and stuff. And so just like you, he took a plea just to go get time and get the heck out so he can support his family. What were they threatening you with, Jeremy? Derrick, how many years or months? I mean, what were they kind of holding?
I was facing 24 years in prison for walking through an open set of doors. I think it's all on video. I thanked a police officer for his service. The police officer gives me a friendly fist bump, inviting me into the building. I'm heard on video reminding people I chanted freedom, and I reminded people to not destroy anything, no vandalizing, no destruction of property. I spent less than 10 minutes inside the public rotunda area, thanked the police officer again, and walked out the same set of doors I entered. And I was facing 24 years in prison because they're using this 1512 obstruction of official proceeding charge, which is what they're throwing against most January 6ers, which doesn't even fit the crime surrounding January 6th, because that whole charge is about tampering with a witness. No one tampered with a witness on that day, but they've proven they can do whatever they want. And so that's a 20-year felony just on that one charge alone. So that's what they're doing to everyone. And then they hold that over your head. And then, now you're facing all this prison time. You have a family. And for the record, I feel that I'm somewhat of a Michigander because I spent my time in federal prison in Michigan. So I followed a lot of the Michigan politics this time last year.
Where at?
FCI Milan, right outside of Detroit, Michigan. Milan, Michigan. Milan prison there.
Well, I'm going to let you know, besides what you've experienced, Michigan is a beautiful state. I've been to West Virginia. West Virginia is obviously very beautiful with the mountains and everything else. But Michigan is a very beautiful state. So
you guys have the most beautiful sunsets I've ever seen. I'm not even just saying that. I would sit there every day. I've always been taught to find the beauty and find God's glory in everything. And, I started a trend there. 'Cause I'm from West Virginia. I'm an outdoors guy. And I would sit out in the yard in the evenings, and I was watching across the road and stuff outside the fence, and I started seeing deer. And so it would be my evening routine. I'd watch these deer come out into the field every day and against the Michigan beautiful sunset. And people would be like, "What are you doing, man?" I'm like, "There's deer over there." No way. And then everybody's watching the deer and everything. And so Michigan's beautiful. It absolutely is.
Now, were there other January 6 folks in the same prison as you? Did you guys talk? I mean,
yeah.
Okay.
Eventually, I was the first January 6er to arrive at that prison, and so I had a lot of questions, just from people being fascinated by the whole experience. And but yeah, they ended up being some more, and I think now there's multiple there in that prison as well right now. I don't know how many, but the last I checked, there was 5 or 6 that were in there. So as they would say, I was the OG of the J6 prisoners at that prison.
Wow, political prisoner, that's for sure. And you said you spent 8 days in solitary confinement?
Yep.
Okay, why?
Yep. I refused the COVID vaccine. I got there and they said, "Are you vaccinated?" I said, "No." "Do you want the vaccine?" I said, "No." They said, "Well, you got to go to quarantine." I was like, "That's fine." And quarantine is the whole, which is, people don't realize this, but it's really jail inside a jail. It's prison inside a prison. And it's where like the people who break the rules in prison go to the hole. Well, they threw me in there for not taking the COVID vaccine and held me in there. And it was mentally challenging to say the least, but in a weird way, I'm thankful. That's the closest I've ever been to God, was sitting in solitary confinement.
Wow. And I mean, you made a point earlier too, is like compared to a lot of the other January 6ers who are spending hundreds of days in solitary confinement.
I don't know how they do it, Garrett. I really don't. I don't know how they do it. I remember sitting in there, and it's just, man, it's mentally challenging. I played college football. I've went out in the woods and went on, weekend or 3 or 4 day hunting trips in the woods by myself, spending the night and everything. That was fun, being isolated and being in solitary in that aspect. You have enough room to basically take 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. You can touch both walls, side to side by just reaching out your arms. The things that you take for granted every day, feeling the sunlight, seeing the stars, feeling the wind, seeing green grass, listening to the birds chirp. I mean, all these things that you're deprived. Humans are social creatures by nature. And when you do that, that is just, it's so inhumane. It's so unnatural to do this to someone. I don't know how these guys did it for hundreds of days. They are some of the most mentally tough, amazing patriots in this country.
Amen to that. And so I want to kind of push, because, the whole point of this month is to really kind of present to the audience who else is going to watch these interviews about, narratives. We've seen it with the pandemic. We've seen it with the George Floyd protests, which evolved into riots, but they were mostly peaceful. So whoever controls the corporate media, and I want to get into your stance on Section 230 here in a little bit, but whoever controls the media, whoever controls the censorship on social media, controls the truth. I mean, it's been proven. If you censor folks, you can push out what you want to, and the masses, unfortunately, if you tell a lie long enough, people start to believe that it's true. So I want to give the audience an example that just kind of went viral the other day, and this is an Israeli soldier kicking a Palestinian woman, and her name is Fatima Amaneh. I think I said that right. And she was just actually released by the hostage deal. So she was part of the negotiations with releasing the Israelis and Americans and some the other folks around the world. And she was part of the Palestinians who was released. And so this video, this guy posted, got over 3 million views. And it shows an Israeli soldier, I'm going to put it right up right now, kicking a woman while she's down. And obviously that's very damaging. And you're like, holy cow, a defenseless woman being kicked while she's done. It's horrific. Well, this went viral. And it had an uproar on X, and everybody's, this is why the Israeli soldiers are so bad. It pushes a narrative. So let's show the unedited version of what happened, when the truth of what happened. This Israeli soldier just sitting there minding his own business, and this woman comes up and stabs him, and he defends himself. So again, if you push out only part of the truth, then you're only getting part of the narrative, right? And so again, I just want to show she's stabbing him. He defends himself, kicks her, and then kicks her when she's down. So different story. And so this is my kind of what I always tell folks is question me, question the corporate media, question everything. We have to quit reacting, okay? We have to get the truth, and we have to get all sides of that truth, and that's how we have conversation. That's how we move this country forward. But again, I'm pushing this out right now to teach people that's what January 6th has been, is a narrative. They have not released the footage. So they get folks like you, they don't show you the evidence, and they basically scare you and say, hey, look, if you don't do this, you're going to rot in prison for over 2 decades. And all you have to do is admit your guilt and plea, and you'll serve 3 months and everything else and blah, 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 blah. But then you're labeled. You admitted your guilt. And then when you come out and you're like, you know what, I'm running for Congress, then they paint the picture, says, well, he says he feels sorry. He admitted his guilt. He admitted he's wrong. No, you did what you needed to do for your family, right? So you don't have to rot in prison for 2 decades. So I don't ever judge anyone who takes a plea, because when Ryan Kelly took his plea in the state of Michigan, everybody was judging him and, saying he's a quitter. I'm like, don't be judging any of these folks, man. Like, you're not in their position. They have over 20 years of hard time on your head, or you can just serve 3 months and get out. To me, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, when you start looking at everything surrounding January 6th and the court cases and everything, you quickly realize it's not a matter of if you can win. It's how do you lose the least amount, because the jury pool's tainted, the judges are corrupt, the court system's corrupt. They won't move the trials out of D.C. You have no chance of winning anything. And my thing is, look, I've got 4 kids, and my oldest at the time of my arrest was 5 years old, and so I'm not going to miss out on my children's entire lives and rob them of having a father in their life just to prove a point, because I'm not willing to swallow my pride a little bit. Sometimes you got to do that. And, it's ironic, because I used to watch these Netflix documentaries and I'd be like, I would never plead guilty to something I didn't do. I had the same mentality. So it doesn't bother me when people say it, because I had the same mentality before being in this position. I'll just tell you that when you have the weight of the entire government coming down your head, and there's other things that I can't get into that I would say some of these other January 6 people can't get into either. But when I'm trying to think how to say this as a general statement. I'm not saying this happened to me. I'm just, in general, I know that they also found ways to try to threaten family members with charges as well. When those things start happening, it kind of gets a little bit more real for people as well. And so at the end of the day, my loyalty is to my family first. As a Christian, my job is to be the protector and provider for my family, and you can't do that if you're behind bars. And then back to the January 6th footage, something that a lot of people don't discuss and doesn't get enough coverage, in my opinion, is we remember the great purge that happened on January 8th of all these conservatives getting wiped off social media. How much footage of January 6th was erased on that day? That was they didn't just get rid of conservative accounts. They erased evidence surrounding January 6th that would have changed that narrative.
Yeah, I've been through this several times. I've been banned off YouTube twice. I just kicked off, a couple months ago for revealing the border crisis, just revealing how the invasion is happening. They kicked me off, said it was hurtful. I had 250,000 subscribers. I'm slowly starting to build that platform out. I started a Facebook group called Michiganders Against Excessive Quarantine, early in the pandemic in April. And that grew to 400,000 people in 4 weeks. That was clipped because I was advocating the spread of disease. I co-founded a nonprofit called Stand Up Michigan. We were taken down at election time because we were telling people like, hey, we need to question some things. So yeah, I've been through that garbage. The FBI visited my house, right? Because somebody reported that I was a radical right extremist right after January 6th. But you said it best, brother. And then Patton said this: God, family, country.
Yep.
And that's the order that it goes in. And so I think it's great that you're still involved in the fight. So I got to ask this question, though. So you get out of prison and you're like, you know what? I want to run for Congress. Like, how did this all even evolve? You went from state rep to basically prisoner. Now you're out. What in the back of your mind? I mean, what did your wife say? Did she say, I want you to run? Why are you doing this? I mean, what all happened?
I'll say it took some convincing of my wife at first, but I'll first say I never had any intentions of running for federal office. So in West Virginia, we have what we call citizen legislators. It's only a 60-day session. It's like, part of January, all of February, part of March, and that's it. And so I never really had any desire to run for federal office because, my thing is I've got 4 kids. I like being a soccer coach and basketball coach and help with football and, all these things. And I wanted to protect my family from the nastiness of the national media and the politics that come at that level. Wanted to be home with my family all the time. And I had a lot of people asking me to run back then, even because I was already known as one of the most conservatives, outspoken conservatives in West Virginia. But after January 8th, I guess, when they came to my house and ripped me away from my wife and children, drug us into the middle of the swamp, and we were just blasted all over the national media that you couldn't imagine. You kind of look around and you're like, well, we're here now, we're in the middle of the swamp. Well, what do? You can either curl up and cry about it, or you can fight your way back out. And so we started attempting to fight our way back out. And along the journey, we found that most Republicans, elected Republicans, I should say, at every level of office, don't have the courage to actually step up and have your back and fight this corruption that's taken place. They don't have the courage. They talk a big game. They love taking photo ops. They love sending out fundraising emails and fundraising posts on social media. But, do you know that not a single member of Congress has even attended a single January 6th hearing that's taken place less than 2 blocks from where they're at every single day? They haven't even attended. And they know all this corruption is taking place in the court system. Not that they could do anything, but they're, them showing up would probably help say, hey, we got our eyes on this. There might be an investigation. Why have none of these corrupt judges been through an impeachment process at this point? So there's a lot of questions. And so as I got out of prison and I continued to fight not only for myself, but my January 6th, my fellow J6 patriots, and trying to get them some help, I realized that none of these Republicans had the courage to touch this. And so, and it's bigger than January 6th. I mean, they're now going after parents who speak out at school board meetings and people who make memes and people who are pro-life sidewalk advocates. I mean, basically every conservative is now a target. They've literally labeled MAGA as a domestic terrorist group in this country. And so this is not a time for weak politicians. This is a time for, I tell everyone that politicians got us in this mess. The only thing that's going to get us out of this mess is patriots. We got to get patriots to step up and run for office. And so through that, after a lot of prayer and everything, I went to my wife and said, hey, I think I need to run for Congress. And she said, I think you're crazy. We're not doing that. And I said, well, I totally get where you're coming from. Just pray on it. Think about it, And then I was invited to come to speak at an event, and she came to this event with me. She heard me. I mean, she knows our story, obviously, but it's different when you're in front of 150, 200 people. And I share my story, our story, and the questions from the people in the audience. And she saw how much people didn't know and just how much they supported all, what we were doing and everything. She came to me a few days later and was like, let's do it. Like, let's do it. And I said, are you for real? And she's like, yeah. And I said, all right, we're going to do it then. And so that's kind of how it came about. I have no intentions of staying in DC. I want to serve a term or two and come home. Like I said, I've got kids, young kids. I want to be home with them, but I understand that no one else is willing, or very few people, no one in office that is willing to. It's one thing to step up and speak out on what needs and do the things that need to be done when it's easy. It's another to be willing to do that when and accept the consequences that come with those actions. I don't think that most of our members of Congress, there's probably a few, but I don't think most are willing to accept those consequences. So when push comes to shove, they just kind of hide in the back. I'm willing to accept those consequences. They can't do anything to me they haven't already done. I've already felt this, already went through it, and I'm still standing and I'm still fighting. If I can do it, then so can anyone else across this country.
I love that. I think that's a message that a lot of folks can really resonate to, because they sit in the background. Sometimes they feel like they're defenseless. They can't do anything. And I always tell, like, hey, look, this whole country is founded on ordinary people doing extraordinary things.
Yep.
You don't have to run for Congress or governor or anything else like that. If you want to run for your local school board, or just get behind candidates. I mean, that's one thing that this, like when you're running for Congress or any level of office, you need that army of folks, that grassroots army of folks to do the door knock and the phone calls, the volunteer, to do the mailers and everything else. And that's how you can really, really inspire people to get involved. So you don't think you have to run for office. I mean, you just get behind good folks that you believe in, and that's how you can contribute. That's for sure. So let's go into the red district. You said whoever's going to win the primaries pretty much guaranteed that you're going to win in the general, because it's a very, very red MAGA district. And you're going up Carol Miller, I think her name is.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And so some of the things that she supported was, she supported the war in Ukraine, sending billions and billions of dollars of that hard-earned money. Where else is she at in some of these issues that you would say that are a little bit different than what your beliefs are, brother?
Well, first of all, she's got a D rating in terms of the Liberty score, which is, atrocious for one of the reddest districts in the country. That might be fine in a purple district in New York that you're just happy to have an R in there. That might get by with that. But, and so she supported forcing the military members to receive the COVID vaccine in order to keep their career in the military. And then even more concerning is just in general, was after Ron DeSantis first announced that he was running for president, she was on local radio and they asked, well, now that Ron DeSantis has announced, this is back over the summer, now that he's announced he's running, who are you supporting in the primary? And she said, oh, I'm just going to wait and see everybody who's running. I'm not, getting involved in all that right now. And I was like, what? So I'm waiting on air. I can hear this because I'm the very next interview. They asked me the same question. I said, look, I'm supporting President Trump. They can throw him in prison if they want to. I'll vote for him from cell block 6 if he has his name on the ballot. I don't care. I got President Trump 100%. And so to me, that's the distinct difference there as well. I'm somebody who's wants to stand on the national stage beside President Trump and beat the drum of freedom, not only for my district here in West Virginia, but for every single God-fearing American conservative across this country. We've got to start flipping the red districts red in this country. We got about 70 congressional districts. It doesn't matter who wins the Republican primary. They're going to win the general election. We got to go get America First patriots, go get the fighters in those districts. Imagine having 70 Matt Gaetz in Congress. Instead, we've got a couple of Matt Gaetz type of people and a bunch of rhinos. We should have 70 in Congress right now. So I'm going to join the Freedom Caucus. She's not a member of the Freedom Caucus, so would be a huge upgrade there as well. So I'm really excited for what we're bringing to the table here and giving the people of this district another option.
Yeah, I love it. I love everything you have to say. And just let the folks who are watching right now, if you go in the description, you can find Derrick's website and go check out a lot of his issues and what he believes and everything else that's on his website. And if you want to donate to his campaign, obviously, when you're running for office, you need money. That is for sure. You need money. You got to get your narrative out there. And he has a lot of the same things that we believe in, folks, bringing down that national debt, stopping these endless wars, supporting our military, stopping the invasion in the South, producing jobs. And let's talk about West Virginia and coal and natural resources. I mean, what are you going to do there for your folks in your home state?
Well, the first thing we got to do is we got to go after the EPA. First of all, let me just clarify. I would like to abolish every single 3-letter agency, the FBI, the EPA, the DOJ, all the Department of Education, Federal Department of Education, return that power back to the states, back to the local communities, back to you and me and we the people. Now, having said that, we know that that would be a very hard task to achieve. So I don't necessarily campaign and promise I'm going to be able to do that because I'd be one of 435 people. But that is my beliefs. I would abolish all these agencies. But in the meantime, we've got to fight back and get some common sense within that EPA realm So for people to understand what they really did to the war on coal here in West Virginia, we're a coal producing state, natural gas, oil, a big timber industry, all these things. And so during the Obama administration, they overregulated coal to the point, and this is not hyperbole, this is not like an exaggeration. They literally required the water that's leaking out and coming out of the coal mines had to be cleaner than the water that's coming out of the tap in my kitchen sink for me to drink. And so it's literally impossible to meet those regulations. That's really kind of started this whole shutting down of the coal industry. And it's crazy to me that, we've got all this energy, not just in West Virginia, in this country. We've got so much oil and natural gas and coal. Under President Trump, we were a net exporter of energy. And now we have our resident, I'm not going to call him president, the illegitimate Biden regime, is standing on the national stage begging Venezuela and all these other countries for energy when we have enough of it right here. We shouldn't be dependent on any other country. And so the first thing we got to do is we got to stop allowing these unelected bureaucrats in these three-letter agencies, which are unconstitutional. We got to stop allowing these these unelected bureaucrats in those agencies from creating laws and enforcing laws. Laws are supposed to originate in the House or the Senate. And there was a big ruling, actually, of West Virginia versus EPA. The Supreme Court ruled in West Virginia's favor within the last year. So people should really get familiar with that particular ruling, because they said just that the EPA cannot create law. And this is going to have far-reaching effects in other industries as well. It's a huge win for conservatives in this country.
Well, you mentioned regulation, and I saw on your platform about Section 230 with really kind of honing in these social media companies. So I'm going to play the devil's advocate. We don't want, and obviously you're saying that you have a little bit more of a libertarian mindset like I do. You don't want the government involved in businesses. That's one thing that we do not like, obviously, is big government. So aren't you kind of doing that when you're starting to regulate these kind of privately owned businesses by trying to bring down Section 230? I get it, but with that kind of belief system, how do you combat that?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a very fair question. The way I look at it is these big tech companies are, to me, they're utilities at this point. If I call my brother on the phone and say, hey, I think that Trump won the election, Verizon or AT&T or whoever else, they're not allowed to just shut my service off and deny me service to where I can't use a cell phone anymore. Well, big tech has gotten to that point where look, years ago, people would, small towns and everything, they would advertise in the local newspaper of the town hall meetings or whatever it is, the school board meeting and all these services. Well, those are now advertised on Twitter and Facebook. And so if you're denied the access to use that, then to me, that's the same as Verizon cutting off your cell phone on that. And so I think that there has to be some sort of regulations in the point of, I think where I probably stand would be a digital bill of rights for the American people. I think that is a good step in the right direction. I don't want to tell them how to run their business or that they're not allowed to make money or any of those things. I think that we just need to step in and say, look, you cannot deny American citizens the right to use this open platform of social media.
I like that. I never heard of it put that way, digital bill of rights. So let's move on to education, because this is what I really feel. If the Republican Party can unite, all right, if we can actually come together and unite and get on the same messaging, I think we clean house in the next election cycle, because that's one thing the Democrats have not done is they haven't really went moderate. They went more radical, and they're really putting some issues out there that most folks, normal Americans, the people in the middle, these independents, are scratching their head going, why the hell are you guys doing this? And some of the biggest things is having biological men compete in women's sports. Right? Title IX just gets thrown out the window because we want to be all inclusive, and everything that's going on in these public schools with allowing boys using girls' locker rooms and restrooms. I mean, it just all got out of hand. It truly has. And I feel if we get on the same message and say, hey, we're not anti-gay and anti-homo or homophobic or transphobic. We just can't make policy for a very small minority of the population that's going to have a negative impact on the group as a whole. I mean, make safe places for all kids. And that includes daughters and your granddaughters and girls. I mean, it's just common sense to me. So what are you kind of stances on that when people, label you as a homophobe or a transphobe? Because I've already kind of figured out you kind of probably have the same belief systems, that you probably think it's hot garbage that girls are using boys' restrooms and so forth.
Well, I went to our local school board meeting not too long ago, and I said, look, if you guys don't want to start putting boys in the girls in my girls' locker room or whatever, I have no problem going back to prison if that's what it takes. I want to defend my little girls and my wife at all costs, and that's really how it come down to it. But to answer the specific question is, to your point, I don't care if there's a grown man and he wants to pretend that he's a woman. I have no issues with that. He has the right and the freedom to do that. And quite frankly, if somebody says that he can't pretend or believe that he's a woman, I would defend and say, like, I think the guy's crazy, but he has the right to believe that if he wants to. Where I draw the line is when they start forcing me and my family and the rest of society to pretend that he's a woman. And then that becomes very distinct when they say, he's going to use the bathroom with your little girls. Well, no, that's forcing my little girls to pretend that he's a woman. It's forcing my wife to pretend that he's a woman. We're not going to do that when wants to play sports against your little girls. Well, no, it's forcing my family to pretend that he's a woman. So that is where I draw the line is look, you can, and look, 21 and older, if you're a grown adult and you're paying for it out of your own pocket and you want to do that and you want to mutilate your body, I think it's crazy. I think that there should be some education on that, and doctors who took an oath to do no harm are doing harm. But that's a whole other story. In terms of the right and the freedom to do that, look, there's a 35-year-old man who wants to, sexually mutilate his body, pretend, to become, to attempt to portray himself as a woman, then he has the freedom to do that. But they got to stop attacking our children. This cannot be pushed on our children. Anyone who's a child, number one, they don't look. You can't even drink a beer. You can't rent a car. You can't vote, but you can make a sex change that's going to be life changing for the rest of your life. Like that. This is insanity that we're allowing this to happen. So we got to protect our children, and we got to protect the taxpayers. I don't want my tax dollars. Don't steal my money and then go pay for that stuff. Grown adult wants to pay for it out of their own pocket. That's on them. I think it's crazy, but they have the freedom to do that. But we got to protect our children. We got to protect the family structure and the family unit, and we got to protect the taxpayers.
Yeah, I mean, everything you said, guess what? It's common sense.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's not so common, unfortunately, and people are afraid to speak out because you get attacked, you get canceled. They'll come and make your life a living hell. I mean, that's what they try to do, is they try to fearmonger folks. But again, if we just come on the same message and continue to push this out, the middle is going to be like, yeah, it's totally 100%. I can get behind that, because we're not going to get behind all the issues. I mean, that's just America. We're a very diverse community, but we can have conversation without attacking. We can have conversation without trying to cancel one another. And we just really have to unite our country again. That's for sure.
I'll tell you another big thing that conservatives need to do, in my opinion, is we need to. So they've turned to these public universities. It's not like when you were in college or when I was in college or whatever. They've turned them now into these liberal indoctrination camps, and they're using this money to. I've met so many families who they send off their child who's normal, if you will. They have they were raised with conservative beliefs, and they go there after 4 or 5 years in college. They're like as far left as you can get. I mean, that's what's happened, and it's unfortunate. But I think that any university who wants to push this liberal ideology, they should not get funding from the tax dollars. They can be private if they want to do that, but we should cut the funding out from underneath these public universities who are pushing this, because in my opinion, it's the same as a religion. You can't go there. I mean, you can't push Christianity in these schools, and that's fine with public schools. But I believe that when you really break it down, this cult of transgenderism, this rainbow mafia, if you will, I believe it is a religion, and it should be treated as such. And that would eliminate a lot of this using our tax dollars to indoctrinate children.
Amen. And I've made these points because what I've been doing on all my platforms is showcasing these parents and grandparents and community members standing up against this. And some of the points that I have heard that they were really great parents is, hey, look, my kid goes there and he doesn't get offended if he doesn't see the cross or the crucifix on the wall. So why is your kid going to get offended if there's not a pride flag? Right.
Well, our test scores are going down every year, in terms of the reading, math, English, the things that matter. But they're creating these social justice warriors, which is really what they've turned our government. I've stopped calling them public schools because they're government schools at this point.
Correct.
And so that's really what it's come down to, is they're prioritizing the social justice stuff over our children's actual education. When I was a kid, I didn't know if my third grade teacher was a Republican or a Democrat or married, not married. I didn't know these things. I knew that this person was teaching me reading, math, English, and the things that matter. And that's what we need to get back to, is focusing on the actual education side of things.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I've made this point many times. Like, hey, look, if you're part of the alphabet crew, go start your own school.
Yeah.
And go indoctrinate your kids on how you want to be taught. And if you want to have all these books and pornographic materials in a library, go ahead and do that. But let's run a little study. Let's look at the schools who are just getting back to the basics, math, science, reading, the right history, right? And let's see how those kids do compared to those schools. They wouldn't do very well. We all know it. And so I like what you just said. They are just indoctrinating these kids, these social justice warriors, and not getting to the basics, which unfortunately we're going to feel the ramifications for the next several decades as we try to clean this up. And I've said this time and time again, Derrick, we're no longer holding the line. We're taking back lost ground now. We truly are. So again, folks, if you want to follow Derrick, man, go on his website, check him out. If what he said today resonated with you, if you'd like to support him, I always tell folks, hey, buy him a cup of coffee, donate $5. You want to buy him a burger, donate $10. Buy him something, buy him a beer. I don't care. So if you find it in your heart that you're like, I like what this guy stands for, even though he's in West Virginia, so a lot of my following is in Michigan. Hey, look, this is a nationwide crusade that we have going on right now with these guys standing up and women standing up and putting themselves out there. So if you find it in your heart that you would like to buy him a cup of coffee or a beer or anything else, donate to his campaign. That's for sure. What would you like to leave the audience with, Derrick?
Well, first, I want to thank you once again for having me on the show, man. It's been awesome. Exactly like you said, I tell everyone this is not my race. This is a race for the American people. Look, I live in West Virginia, but I feel that the person who represents me the most and the best in Congress is Matt Gaetz, who's in Florida. And it's unfortunate that our federal government has gotten to the point where it's so big and so overreaching, in my opinion, unconstitutionally, that these are national races at this point. It's not supposed to be that way, but they are. I want you to know that you're not wasting your money. As you said earlier, we're endorsed by General Flynn, Mike Lindell, Veterans for Trump. We're raising money. We've raised about $250,000 so far. We have the closest race in the country right now for someone challenging an incumbent in a primary. And the last thing I'll say to you is, I want you to understand, and you need to know that we're right now in a battle for the future of this country. Yesterday, it was the January 6th political prisoners, such as myself. Today, they're going after not only President Trump, they're going after people who make memes on social media, parents who speak out at school board meetings, pro-life sidewalk advocates. And if they get away with this today, then tomorrow they're going to come after every single God-fearing American conservative across this country. You may be next. That's the honest truth. We have to nip this in the bud, stand up and fight right now. And the main reason that I'm running is my fear is not what they can do to me. I've already experienced what they can do to me. That's not my fear. My fear is that we kick this can down the road and force future generations to one day have to be forced into standing up and fighting back against the tyranny that they find themselves living under. My fear is being 70 to 80 years old, watching my children and my grandchildren being forced to fight the tyranny that me and my generation did not have the courage to stand up and fight. So I put my kids down every single night. I can look them in the eyes. I can look myself in the mirror, and I know that I'm doing everything that I possibly can to preserve and maintain and take back individual liberty and freedom for my children and future grandchildren.
Amen, brother. Holy cow. And just to hit on what you just said, it's happening in Ireland and a lot of other countries right now that they firmly believe if you post something, a meme, you say something, you make a video that it offends someone, then you have every right to lose your freedom. That's what they believe. And it's happening. I mean, that is one thing that's going on in Ireland right now. Is it's just insane that we're even talking about these types of things. But Derrick, you're exactly right. If we don't stand up now, we're not going to have anything to stand up for here in the future. And this little idea that we called America will be no longer.
Yep. Well, if you look at the charging documents in most January 6 cases, you can look them up. Most of us are being accused and charged and thrown in prison for things that we said leading up to January 6 or things we said on January 6, not from our actions. Not from our actions. It's and you look at my charging document specifically, it's about he shared I shared memes that said with the hashtag stop the steal. I shared memes that Trump won. I chanted USA and we want Trump on the Capitol steps. That's literally in my charging documents. These are the things I'm being accused of by our government. And I'm not unique. We have people right now sitting in prison for years and some decades for things that they said, not from what they did on January 6th. And look, let's just go ahead and get it out of the way for anybody. Yes, there were some, when you talk about January 6th, there were some good people who did dumb things that day. There were some bad people who did bad things, as I believe there were some provocateurs in there. By and large, it was mainly good people who were law-abiding citizens. But even the people who broke a window, I'm not condoning that. I think that they would not condone that either. But let the punishment fit the crime. Should someone be facing 30 to 40 years in prison for breaking a window? Pay for the window, do some community service, and learn from it and go on. I mean, but that's what we're seeing right now. But it's all because they're more focused on what that person said leading up to January 6th than the fact that they broke a window on January 6th. They're more focused on the fact that the person said Trump won and we got to take our country back and things like that. So you're right now in America, people are being charged and thrown in prison based on things that they said or the things that they thought or the things they shared on social media. So don't think it can't happen here, because it's already happening here. And we got to get some people in office at every level of office, from school board all the way up, who have the courage to stand up and fight this tyranny that we find ourselves facing today.
Amen. Folks, if you'd like to follow Derrick, go to his website, check him out. Hey, Derrick, we're going to be watching. And do me a favor, brother, as this starts to evolve, man, come on back and fill us in with what's going on. When is your primary?
May 14th, and I'd love to come back sometime, man.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have you on, especially before then, kind of see where you're at and give you a little final push and support to throw your way. That's for sure. Thanks so much for coming on, brother.
Thank you for having me, man. Appreciate you guys.
All right. Good luck, man.
Bye.
Bye. Wow. I like bringing those folks on. I truly do, because we see so much negativity in politics. We see so much negativity on corporate media, social media, and everything else. But I like to bring those folks on and say, hey, there are good people fighting for all of you. There are good Americans that are still standing up, doing what they need to do for all of you. And we must get behind these folks. We must support these folks, because he's right. If we don't stand up, folks, I'm telling you what, you're not going to have anything to stand up here in the future. And you do not want to be that person on your deathbed when you're 70, 80, 90 years of age, and your grandchildren, and hopefully your great-grandchildren, come up to you and say, hey, Papa, Grandpa, what was it like when we were free? We don't want that to happen. Okay? We do not want that to happen. So God bless you. God bless the state of Michigan. Of course, and always, God bless